do you have any sort of inspirational stories of times people did make you feel welcome in academia? Because obviously there's been a lot of discussion of times where you might have felt isolated, but are there any people you might want to recognize, or like experiences that you can G people up with? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll try and bring a little bit of positive, some positive stories to this. I think doing a PhD, you'll come across people from a lot of different backgrounds. So, I mean, I've been working with people from all over the world, and it's not limited to the Black experience. There are lots of other experiences of ethnic minorities in PhDs as well that I've learned from. So it's not everyone who makes you feel unwelcome, but as we've said, it's more of the sort of institutionally at a larger scale that could be the problem. I've got I mean, all of the people that I've worked with in my lab, there's an Iranian student, Neda Mousavi. There's people from all around the world who make you feel welcome. That's not really what the issue is. I think all of us would say that we've come across amazing people, because people generally are quite amazing. It's just more the system that we're working within, which tends to be the problem sometimes. But yeah, I don't know if anyone wanted to.
Obviously, I go back so many years, as I said, but I'm also here now to learn from our young people. But many years ago, when I was looking at doing a PhD, I was obviously in Nairobi in Kenya, and I wrote to a professor at the University of Nottingham. So my own initiative, which was to write to him, and I was very surprised when I received a response from him. So that basically was offering me a scholarship to go to the University of Nottingham. Then I was going to do a Master of Science degree. So I got there, and I have to say, this was in 1989, and I felt most welcome when I got there, to the extent that after a year, instead of going back to Kenya, the same professor offered me a scholarship to continue with a doctorate. And so, long story short, I've been going back to Kenya ever since. In a sense of obviously going back to do whatever I wanted to do from there. The beauty of all of this is that I feel actually that I'm doing for the developing world and Africa much more from here than I could have done from there, partly because of lack of resources and so on. So there is always this thing about using difference, Wayne will know about this, using difference to make a positive difference, and having in ourselves the ambition to change. As I said earlier, the system at Imperial is changing. It's not changing as fast as we would have liked, but it is changing. And I think this particular initiative here is an example of that. And it has been identified, obviously, at the university level. So it will be upon us now, actually, us here, to make sure that we build on that momentum so that it's much better going forward. What I didn't say, actually, when I was speaking, and I wanted to say, was that the future is yours. The future is yours. If you look at Africa, for example, more than 60 to 70% of the population is below 40, right? And so that's where the future is, and the future is you over here. So it's not anybody else's responsibility but yours to make sure that what you leave for your children tomorrow is something that's not going to be the experience that we've gone through. But there are, people who are very supportive, and even as far as 1989, I found some in Nottingham. Thank you.
I can give my experience. I guess this is, I didn't think this would ever happen, but this is like the academic equivalent of giving a shout out. So I'll give a shout out to Andrea, who's here, because I've had, well, I think we've developed a bit of a brotherhood, I would say, even just, well, I'll explain it very briefly, like going through bioeng and actually going around and not seeing another Black face and literally seeing Andrea and just being able to smile or have a nod, literally, was enough to get you through some days. I would say even seeing Gifty, seeing Kemi in the department, and then just having a supportive word or a little chat. I've had very positive interactions with Parry. Parry is one of the most supportive people I've met, and it's kind of going full circle in terms of the family. As she's, well, my supervisor's first PhD student, and just kind of that family support. Jess Wade was another person I'd say who's been really supportive to me and sent opportunities my way. And I'm saying that because she's not a Black person, in the sense that there are people that get it and there are people that are aware and that can support. It's just that unfortunately they're not the majority. And we come into these environments sometimes, and that's where the isolation comes in, which is why you've heard a balanced experience, but at times a negative experience, because it can be better. Imagine if we didn't have to think about any of this and it was just our science. We wouldn't have this room, we wouldn't need to be here, but we'd all be working together. And I think that's the power of what we're doing here today. So.
Yeah, I think that similarly to Deshane, I've found a lot of people, both in the department and Imperial more widely, that have been of incredible support. And I think that support has come at a time that was difficult, because I didn't necessarily know how to solve some of the problems that were there all along, but really seemed to manifest themselves when I moved to the UK. I think that we were talking about this with Deshane earlier. Racism and institutional racism in the UK is extremely insidious. You don't see it overtly on the streets. I can think of very few incidents where people have been outwardly abusive towards me in my day-to-day life. I can think of many institutions that have either benefited or ignored or went along with some of the injustice. And I think that this in me was a kind of process that started as a revolution, an internal revolution. I got really angry, really, back in 2020. And then I've calmed down over the years and I'm slowly relaxing. But I think I'm extremely grateful to all the people that have seen me do all of this, that have seen me go from a state of, you know, acceptance of the status quo, because I don't believe I was particularly active before a certain series of events and a certain series of reflections of my own. And I think that it must have been quite surprising to see me all of a sudden completely, you know, change all my perspective about something and try and understand how I could help. And that includes a lot of people in my department, includes people in my life, include, you know, people beyond the department that have been of great support. You mentioned Wayne. Wayne has been just sensational, where we would meet up with Wayne almost every 2 weeks for 2 years, even if it's just to ask how we were doing. And that is something that, yeah, was absolutely immense. And yeah, I think everybody that's been patient with me as I tried to figure this out and we could put out this scholarship is, yeah, somebody that I would thank and appreciate in this moment.
I thought I was going to hide out on this side and not have to answer any questions, but since everyone has spoken, I suppose I have to. I wasn't going to shout out anyone because there are so many people that have been instrumental during my time at Imperial, but I suppose I should. So my experience has been very different. Me being able to do a PhD at Imperial was because I was put forward for a scheme very similar to this one 6 years ago. And the people that put me forward were, of course, Professor Anil Barath, Professor Anthony Bull, Dr. Joseph Sherwood, Dr. Van Battenberg Sherwood. So, you know, I've had a very different sort of experience and an isolated one. That's not to say others aren't valid. And the work that's been going on in the department has been very positive over the last few years, and I've just enjoyed my time here, and you know, a lot of different experiences. One of my lectures on how to present was actually on this stage with Professor Anthony Bull, who kept on telling me to project, something that I'm still learning and something that I still have to consciously remind myself of. And it's little things like him telling you where your hands are and how to move your hands. But a lot of those experiences and a lot of the things I've learned, Professor O'Hare was my pastoral supervisor, and he always used to tell me a lot of things about how to interview, how to prepare for interviews, how to tap into the hidden job market, make sure you get your internship. So there has been a lot of positivity in the department and a lot of positive people that have made my time at Imperial special.
Hello. I just wanted to ask you, I think you've mentioned, your journey through your PhD. Some people are finishing, some people are writing up. But then if we were to wind back the clock and you were to start your PhD today, what one thing would you do different, or what do you think can be put in place to make your journey better? Thank you.
Start thinking about what comes after your PhD. The best time to start planning is at the start. Start thinking about networking and start looking at the resources that are available inside your institution. So you have the student services at Imperial that will help you find opportunities, that will help you start writing your CV. Start writing your CV. Start thinking about what will go where and how you're going to sell your own story. So the journey of selling your own story starts not when you're writing up or not at the end of your PhD, but right at the start.
I think time management is something I've struggled with and still struggle with a lot. Just planning ahead. I would often find myself in a situation where I had to begin a project of my PhD, and I would build whatever setup I needed to build in a few weeks. I would start getting the data, I would have preliminary data, everything was fine. And then we'd look at the data, analyze it a little bit, and I thought, oh, there's a problem here. Well, fine, I'll put it somewhere else on the side and work on something else. And that means that you end up doing all the things that you like working on, all the things that you find exciting, and everything that is, new and interesting to you at least. And then you're left with everything that you had left on the side that you had to fix. And that's why you were saying that the second year of your PhD was the best. It was horrible for me because I had to reopen all these cans of worms I had left around. And if I had known, I would have dedicated extended periods of time to one thing. And even if something doesn't work out, stick to it, try and push it through. And if really you cannot figure it out, don't go on another project for too long, forgetting about what you had started in the beginning. It's very conceptual advice, I guess, but for me, it was really, managing your time and knowing when to do what.
Okay. One thing I would change probably is not to be ignorant of what I'm getting myself into. So I think it might be an experience that is similar to here. It's just about knowing how to navigate in the first place. Like even when I went to go do my PhD study, it was actually on a whim. I was told that I was good at research, so I should consider it. It wasn't something I thought about my whole life. So for any student that is going to come into this, I would say to get a lay of the land and actually know what you're coming into. Know who your supervisors are, who's going to be supervising you, what the prospects of the people who have come out of their lab has been like, and also the environment and the support that you're going to get. Going back to, I guess, a lot of the networks that I have ended up creating is partly because of me not feeling that support there. And I think now that they do exist, it's very important that we get involved with it and be a part of it, because there's a lot to be said for peer support, for community support, and just, being able to, once you have you're going through your PhD troubles, having people to bounce off of who have similar experiences to you, and say that it's not just you that's going through this process, that there are many of you who have very similar concerns, and very similar struggles with the science, because as many have said today, there's a lot of failing until you actually get there. So I think it's important to be cognizant of that and to not be ignorant going into the PhD.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of the sentiments in that. I think the main thing for me was reaching out and peer support. It's not something that I actually considered until, to be honest with you, until I came here. I don't speak to people about my PhD, and that can be very isolating. And one thing that I wish I knew going into it is that there are other people and there are places to speak about this with people who are going through the same experiences as me. So I think everyone who's here and everyone who's watching online doesn't need that advice already, because the first step, which is quite often the most difficult one, is knowing that something like this exists. So for me, I wish I knew this 4 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So in my group, we believe in something called all-rounded training, because obviously it's training. And in that, dare I say, to me, the most important relationship, or call it a partnership, is between you and the supervisor. And then you've got your immediate peers. When I was doing my PhD, I remember now, I was actually working on satellite orbital dynamics. So trying to model satellite orbits and things like that. And because it's a very highly nonlinear problem, mathematically speaking, when I tried to linearize it, and obviously you do these iterative loops and so on, it would actually try to converge and then effectively wobble towards the end. So I knew there was something wrong with it. I spoke to Nottingham's leading mathematical professors, and they convinced me that because of the nature of that problem, it had to oscillate like that at the end. And I remember going for coffee with my peers, a gentleman called David Walsh, who was doing his PhD with me. I don't know what I told him, but anyway, he said something to me. Did you try that, or could you try that? Something like this. And actually, I didn't remember it at the time. But it was one winter, very cold winter morning, I think it was 3 a.m., when I woke up and thought about what he said. And I remember getting up and walking about 2 miles to the lab to change a line of code that I've written, about 100,000 lines. And I remember changing the number 6 to 9, right? From 6 to 9. And then I pressed the button and it went like that. So there was no oscillation anymore. I think the point I'm trying to make is that, of course, the partnership with the supervisor is very important. But don't forget your peers. It's quite important that you obviously work within your peer group, because you never know where your solution will come from. Because my 3 months of trying to solve this problem was sorted out by my fellow PhD student, Dr. Walsh. Okay, so the point that was made earlier about think about what you're getting into, but also think about what you're going to do with the PhD afterwards is quite an important one. And if you embrace this all-rounded training, which is not just about the research, but also how you're going to use it after, your supervisor is helping you, yeah, with that, including where you end up doing a job or you stay in academia and so on. I think it's a good one, but it works if you're in a very good partnership with the supervisor.
Can I jump in there? So apologies for not being there in person, because obviously it's much better to be in person, but you know, clinical duties, etc. All right. So so 2 things. I have had quite a positive experience at Imperial. Indeed, I joined Charing Cross in 2012, and I started my research in 2013. And you know, I haven't left, and I have no desire to leave to go anywhere. And that, I think, part of why I've had such a positive experience is I have had incredibly supportive mentorship and sponsorship from a number of people. And those people don't necessarily look like me. They don't necessarily have the same background as me, the same culture, religion, whatever. But what it is they recognize my potential and my enthusiasm, and were able to support me and nurture me to a stage where I could become more successful. And I think, obviously, as everybody said, you know, we've got to pay it forward. So, you know, as you come in, you know, it'd be excellent if you could do the same. And all of us who are champions, mentors, etc., that's one of the things we're going to try and do. And I think what have I learned? Not necessarily what would I have done differently. Maybe, well, no, I wouldn't say that. What have I taken? I think take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. This scholarship is fantastic, and there are other schemes. Yes, we wish there were more. Yes, we wish there wasn't a need for this, but this is an amazing opportunity, you know, and take advantage of when you do go and do your PhD or whatever it is you're going to do next. Take advantage of the opportunities available to you. Imperial College has a wealth of resources to help you with academic writing, public speaking, time management, structuring your research, structuring your writing up, etc. They're fantastic social networks, not just the Black doctoral network, but they're subspecialty networks, and also lots of different cultural interest groups, dance groups, arts, you know, drama, etc. There's so many opportunities available. And as time comes on, there'll be leadership opportunities. There'll be opportunities for you to get different research experience within Imperial, outside Imperial, you know, present your work, present yourself, networking. So I think definitely take advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to you. And then at some point in time, you have to learn the other skill of when to say, no, I've had enough. I don't want to do anymore. So I think those are some of the things I've learned. And I guess, you know, with my other hat on, I see obviously on the stage, we've got our excellent male colleagues, and remotely, we've got our excellent female colleagues. So like I said, I'm a bit older. I've had 3 children. You know, I'm very happy if offline people want to contact me and ask me, how did I juggle this? How do I balance childcare, practical things with having to get the research done? You know, I'm very happy for you to contact me offline. And you can do that, get my email address from Kemi, because I'm going to have to leave now. And thank you so much for asking me to speak and listening to me with Ron.
Thank
All
you
the
so
best.
much, Choma. Thank
Good
you.
luck.
So one last question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, how do you deal with the reality of like being the only Black person in the cohort, and how necessarily do you thrive in an environment where you feel like you don't belong at times?
I don't want to. I don't want to answer this question first. It's a difficult one, to be honest with you. And I put this at under my control. I don't think that I have done what I need to do to look after sort of myself during this process. That's the reality of what I've done. There have been people in my lab who have been people of color, but especially as someone mentioned earlier, coming from an Afro-Caribbean background, the only people, like the friendly tones of the people who helped in our lab, the people who came in and ran the autoclave, they were the Jamaican women who reminded me of my grandma, and they were the people that, you know, I felt a sense of camaraderie with, just based off of that. But then you sort of get into the reality of the situation, that those are the people who are in a lower position than a lot of other people, and that's part of the issue. I think what I would use my sort of, what I would say, I failed to deal with those things myself. I would say to others who are thinking about going into a PhD, there are so many amazing people. I haven't met any of these people before here, but just hearing people speak as well as they all have, and to know that there are people who you can turn to and speak to, that's what I would give advice, to not make the same mistake as me and be insular, and to sort of carry the weight of that. I mean, it sounds like you carried the weight of that for some time, but decided to make a change. And because people have made that change for you, you don't have to make that change all by yourself. So that's what I would say.
I would guess I would add to that, because essentially our experiences sound like they're very similar, but literally I met you today. So I think that is part and parcel of the problem, is that we have mirrored experiences, but because we're so sparsely populated across campus, we never actually bump into each other. So I think in response to you and your question, it's really to seek out your tribe if you can't find it, and also to seek home comforts too. This environment is a great environment, and there are definitely positives to it, but it also is its own bubble, because this is not the home life that I'm used to. As well, I was born in London, I was born in Croydon. And if you know Croydon, you know Croydon doesn't look like this. And even when I went up to Birmingham and the experiences I had there, that was still a different sort of life. But that doesn't mean that that environment is wrong, or this environment is wrong. I think it's just important that you feed from the environments that you're used to as well. I get a lot of strength from my church community, from, as I've said, with the networks that we've set up. And it really is like a buffer. And sometimes it's a counterculture. Sometimes you'll hear something, someone will treat you in a horrible way, and you'll come back and you'll dissect it and go through it and say, that, was this normal? Was this supposed to happen? And I think it's important to have that, and have that duality, because we do exist kind of sometimes in two spheres. but knowing that neither is wrong and that you can easily excel in both if you have a strong identity of self.
Yeah, it's quite hard to follow up on that because they've said most of what I would have said. I think that the first thing is that you in academia might not see a lot of Black people around, but that has the advantage, if I can put it this way, that the ones you do meet very quickly become friends that you hold on to for a very long time. I mean, Shane and I think that I think we started talking because we just nod at each other in the hallways, and there was no reason why we should have nodded. They didn't know each other. There was no context at all in which we had to work together. But just the fact that we were both Black and that we knew that we were the only ones, it was a yeah, I know, you know. And that turned into, you know, one time at one point we had a mentor in common, and that's when we started having lunches together. And then from one time you exchange a phone number. You make friends along the way. And the other thing that I wanted to say, and Dashane kind of touched on that, is that PhD is a big part of your life. And I think that you do want a big part of your life to be representative of your environment. The PhD isn't all of your life. So there is your own world outside that you're very much allowed to spend time with, encouraged to spend time with, and interact with. And so I think that despite the fact that academia might not always have the diversity you require, you should always either find the time or find the ways to connect and stay in touch with the people that are around you, your support network, the people you care about, whether it be church for Dashane, for example. For me, my family is a big role in that. I have also a lot of friends that are luckily in London, and so that allows me to be close to them as well. The PhD should never take you away from this. So I think that on one hand, there is indeed the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion, lack of familiar faces, of role models. But on the other side, you should not detach yourself from your own support networks. That is essential. And yeah, that's what I can say about this.
I agree. It's exactly that. We all live in bubbles. And it's also important that you come to Imperial and you try to be part of the community, whatever that community is. So being a minority has its advantages in the sense that it forces you to interact with people you wouldn't otherwise interact with. And it forces you not to be too cliquey. So interact with the people inside the Imperial community, but don't forget about the people outside the Imperial community. And just try to take on as much of everyone's experience as you possibly can.
I just want to say something. I don't have a question. Two things I want to say. First of all, I want to thank you so much for sharing. I know these are deeply personal, very difficult things to talk about, and especially the more junior members of you. I'm a lot older than you, and I don't think I would have the confidence to stand up and say these things. So thank you. I was really touched. The second thing I want to say is I want to shout out Simon Hudson, who's here in the audience. Simon's an author, wrote a really neat book called History Through the Black Experience. And Simon helped us name these scholarships. So I hope he will hang out at the refreshments so we can ask him lots of questions. Thank you for coming.
Okay, with that, I think we should call this to a close and go for some refreshments. Thank you all so much for that excellent question and answer. And we will put some of this on the website if that's okay with you all, because I think it'll be really insightful for people. Thank you.